All right. This is episode 19 of Project SeaCAT. Simple decisions. So, this presentation is all about trying to figure out what the simplest decision possible is, because your artificial intelligence should always be able to handle a very simple concept, right? So we're going to go for the simplest, and if we can figure out how that would work, extrapolating that out becomes a lot easier. So let's start out with just a switch. Not even a switch, the word switch. Obviously, the word switch goes along with an actual switch. This is I/O, input output. So this would be a sense that the AI would have, it'd have something going in or it'd have something going out, or both. In this case, it's both, because it can read the switch, but it can also affect the switch. Then, as well as switch, which is the object itself, you also have on. So you want to be able to switch the switch on, and obviously you want to be able to switch it off as well. But what does that mean in terms of the input output? Well, it's either going to be a 1, which is on, or it's going to be a 0, which is off. It's your standard binary choice, right? Your switch is either on or off. That's what makes it a switch. So each one of these is a concept, and I guess the core of any kind of learning is that the software needs to be able to link different concepts together, right? Which is, what any intelligence needs to be able to do. It needs to be able to say this is related to that, and then it needs to be able to reach conclusions based on different concepts that it has in its mind. So these 6 inputs here are all the components for the most basic of decisions. We have a switch, we have the command switch, we have the command on and off, and we have the data that goes in. So what kind of links will there be between these? If intelligence is all about linking different concepts together, firstly, we've got switch. The word is linked to the actual device itself, right? So if you say switch on, you are saying you want this switch to be on. You've also got conceptual links between switch and the word on and the word off. I know this is very basic stuff, but it's going into detail like this that lets you analyze just what needs to be going on. So let's say you type into your little AI communication box, switch on. You could also say switch off. And from that, it needs to know what it has to do with this thing. Right? It has to know what to pass into it. It's got 2 options for that. It can either pass in the 1 or the 0. These are conceptually linked to the output device, right? In the same way that these are linked to the word switch, because you switch on, switch off, your I/O device takes 1 or 0. So they are intrinsically linked to the switch. They could be linked to other things as well, but because we're focusing on simple decisions, right now we're just going with what we see here. So there would actually be a bunch more lines going off here, but we're not worrying about those for now. So at this point, if you said to it switch on, it wouldn't know what to do, right? Because the only link it has is this, to the word switch. So it might guess. So if you had a totally blank AI, it wouldn't even know these were related until you started saying switch on, then it would form this link, and switch off, then it would form this link. So it'd be like, oh, those two words have been seen together, right? But this one, it'd take trial and error for it to understand that the word switch meant modify this, but you could hint it at the AI in theory. If you said the word switch and you also modified the switch, then it would start creating connections between these different areas, right? It would say, oh, well, switch and IO arrived at the same time. Therefore, there's at least some sort of a connection between them because they've been seen at the same time. The connection might be totally random, but over time, as you strengthen the connections each time it sees it, this one will become pretty solid. But it doesn't have any information about what to do with these, right? It's got no idea. It could guess, and it could, I mean, initially it would have an idea if you said switch on and you turned the light switch on. Or even if you just said switch and you turned the light switch on, it would associate on, or it would associate one being passed into here with the word switch, because it would have got all three, right? But for now, it doesn't have anything. We're assuming we haven't told it anything, and it only has one output, right? So initially, it's not going to have that connection, but it's going to come to that conclusion pretty soon. For simplicity's sake, it has that connection, right? But you would teach it, as I said, by saying switch and then modifying it or plugging it in, right? Giving it the input while you say switch, and it'd go, that new thing arrived when he said switch. It wouldn't obviously think that, but you know. Anthropomorphizing. I think that's a word. AIs. Anyway, so you would also have a conceptual connection between on and one, right? Because you wouldn't initially, but once you had said switch on and you had turned it on, not only would it have that connection, but it would have this connection, right? Interestingly, it would also make a connection here, because it would basically say, I got switch on at the same time that I saw this and this. So it would just connect everything. It would have connections here, connections here, connections here, connections here. They would be very weak initially, but over time they would build up. And then you could say switch off and do the same thing here. And it would grow to realize that these were linked. So you would do that with some sort of reward-based system where you notified it when it had come to the right conclusion or when it had come to the wrong conclusion, you know. But as long as you showed it, because you have access to this input as well as it does, you could show it, you could teach it in advance what it meant just by demonstrating it. So once it had these connections, like I said, it'd be adding a connection for on to IO, because when you said switch on, it would be seeing that a 1 was being passed into the IO. So it would associate on with both 1 and with the IO. It would do the same with off, when you said switch off. It would also associate 1 with switch, because again, you're saying switch every time 1 is arriving. It's too convenient for it to be a coincidence. So the assumption is made that they are related. And again, you have switch arriving with 0. So here, it looks like, we're just drawing lines to everything, right? But we're not. We haven't got lines between on and off and 1 and 0. You might think there would be, because in our minds, looking at this, we would say they are connected because they're the different options. But it's the very fact that they are the different options, which means they're not connected. For the purposes of this very simple decision, right? Obviously, once you get more advanced, then you would have them connected, but that's because you're like introspecting. And at that point, I think you've got all your different concepts, and even the ones that aren't linked together would still be linked in some higher conceptual kind of net. So each time one of these links was seen, you would like give each connection that was seen a bit of a boost to make it stronger. And the more you said switch on and it turned the light on, or the switch on, and you rewarded it, the more you did that, obviously the connections between all these different things would grow. Especially this one, because every time switch was said, the IO would be being used. So it would end up being basically certain that switch was to do with the IO. Once it had learnt all this, you could feasibly start adding in other switches. But probably for most things you'd be wanting to do with the word switch, it would just be IO. So you could just replace which IO it was, you know? So if you're saying switch on the TV, you would have TV represented by an IO up here. But it would still have basically the same connections because it would be this type, right? If you think of this as a type, you could plug anything into that IO slot, or different IO slots, and then teach them different words. Because in the same way you're saying switch on, you could have it say switch on TV, and it would just create an extra layer of webbing, I guess, tying TV in and linking it to a certain IO object. And so you do that for a while with on off. Eventually you're going to get a very clear pattern. So here it will end up making all these associations for the words switch on. It will say, right, when switch on comes in, it's usually good if 1 is here. So when switch on comes in, it's usually good if this switch has got a 1 in it. So in the past it's seen you doing that, but it also has the option. So you can teach it that if it has a beneficial grouping of concepts that are all consistently beneficial, that it can make the modifications needed in order to satisfy those links. And that would also apply here, mirrored. And basically, that would be, from a pure conceptual point of view, how the most basic of decisions, which is what I called my light bulb test back in the day, what would need to be understood by the AI for that to function. It would need to grasp these connections in some way. But if you had that, you could make it learn enough because it would be learning if it was strengthening these connections by itself. That would be considered learning, right? It would be absorbing the information that it's got, and it would be strengthening its internal concepts based on what it saw. I would say that would be learning. So this would be a very simple machine learning example for doing a light switch. And this is basically stage 1 of what I was talking about. So the idea is I will create a very simple version of my AI. I have a version already from last year, but I'm going to start again because I've thought about it a lot over the past 6 months or so, and I want to kind of tweak a few things, and I just think it's better to start again. It'll be cleaner. I won't feel like I'm cleaning up my old mess. Not that it was a mess, but you know, there was a lot to it, and I don't really want to spend the time figuring that out. I'll look at it, obviously, but starting it again tends to work quite well for me. And yeah, that's basically that. So, what summary can you get from this video, if any? First, everything is a concept, right? You've got the information that's coming in is a concept. How that information is coming in is a concept. Your eyes are a concept, and what you see is a concept. Your external kind of manipulation is a concept as well. And in that simple decision, you have basic examples of all 3 of those. And then concepts are linked. Like, that's basically what makes up knowledge, I guess, is a series of links between different concepts. And the stronger those links, the more certain you are in that knowledge, the more comfortable, I would say, probably, your AI is going to be. And simple decisions are pattern recognition, reflecting on linked concepts, and filling in the gaps for positive outcomes. So it's like I said, if you say switch on the light, it will see that it has a certain pattern which is very strong because it's been strengthened from being used initially via rewards, then just through repetition. It will realize that it's missing something from that positive outcome, and then it will fill in the gaps if it can. So once you get a bit more advanced, it will be about kind of taking multiple possible outcomes and deciding which is the best for given scenarios, but that's just more complicated links of concepts, theoretically. And that is the basic gist of how I'm going about my AI. The more I think about it, it's almost starting to look neural netty, which, you know, I didn't originally plan on, but not going to be a complete neural net. It's going to be more artificial because, you know, it's artificial intelligence. I think a neural net is actual intelligence. Make of that what you will. And that's basically it for now. So, catch you guys later.